Welcome back, fourth graders. Now that you've had a chance to hear the first part of this story, we'll continue on today. You found out yesterday why this was called Zathura. We know that the game Jumanji was discovered underneath this tree by Danny and Walter. And when they brought it home, Danny started to play. And as he was playing the game of Jumanji, another game board fell out. And that was the Zathura game board. So Walter, having no interest at all, he's just upset he even has to babysit his baby brother, is sitting there watching TV. And as he's watching TV, Danny, of course, starts to play. Well, Danny's not going to read the directions or instructions. He just starts rolling the dice. And before you knew it, yep, sure enough, there was this sound of what was like hail, they thought, or maybe some sort of a heavy rainstorm. And before you know it, there was a meteor that came crashing down through the ceiling into the living room. And that's finally when Walter started realizing, wait a minute, something is definitely wrong. Danny knows it, but Walter's just now finally realizing it. Well, as they go along, now Walter realizes, I have to start to play this game, this Zathura. I have to figure out what's happening. I mean, they open the door and they're in outer space of all things. So Walter rolls the dice, and realizes that gravity is reversed for him. And as gravity is reversed for him, he ends up on the ceiling. And that's where that picture was when we first looked at the story, was Walter's tennis shoes up by the ceiling. And here he is up with his body up against the ceiling because gravity was reversed. He rolled the dice, and that's what happened for him. Well, luckily, Danny had a good idea. Danny took a cord, and he threw it up to Walter, and Walter tied it around his belt. And that belt then held him in place so that he didn't float out into that hole that was in the ceiling. Because he thought, if I float out into that hole in the ceiling, I'm going to float all the way out into outer space. So now they're going to continue that game, and we're going to find out more about Zathura and what's going to happen next. Again, read to us by Chris Van Allsburg himself. Before we get too far along, though, let's take a look back again at this genre chart, because this story, Zathura, actually fits in a very specialized category called science fiction. It's on the side of fiction, which are the stories that are not true. Like we had historical fiction with I Survived the Titanic, which is not true. It's based on history. And this one is actually based on science. It starts to go into things about outer space and the solar system and robots and things like that. So all of our stories that are true, remember, we're on this side with nonfiction, and the not true is on the fiction side. And the one we have right now today by Chris Van Allsburg is science fiction. One final thing today, as you're listening to Chris Van Allsburg read through the final part of the story, Zathura, I'm going to have my class keep track on an index card or their notebook, a list of some of the problems that come up, some of the things that happen as this story goes along. We listed one of them yesterday. We talked about how Walter's gravity was reversed, and that caused Walter to float to the ceiling. And with some of my kids, we talked about cause and effect and how something that happens because of something that's causing it. So the Walter was floating to the ceiling. That would be the effect. What caused it? Well, the gravity was reversed. Kind of a cause and effect relationship. And how did they solve this? Well, Danny helped Walter tie a cord to his belt to keep him from floating away. So that was part of that assignment yesterday. You know, we had the character traits of those two boys as well, things that describe them. But today we're going to keep track in my class anyway, and maybe your teacher will do the same, of some problems, things that happen. Maybe there's resolution, but most likely just some problems that come up as this story continues on. Because as you know, things are going to get a little crazy. I mean, as if they're not crazy enough. Poor Walter's up there on the ceiling already. But it's going to continue to get stranger and stranger as we go along. All right, I hope you enjoy Chris Van Allsburg as he reads the second half of this story, Zathura. And we will see you tomorrow.